Good morning, good morning. I hope you can all see me and hopefully hear me. It is Monday the 8th of May 2023. Good morning to everyone in the chat there. Oh, I need to expand my chat to see all the messages. There's been a lot already. Lucy says hello. Danilo wants to know that we're not going to be talking about the coronation. We're not going to be talking about the coronation. So I think that's been done to death, so to speak. The Feckle Puny says A up. Katrina Bryce says good morning. We've got Master Templar there and Nina Hathaway. We've also got Ben Riddings. It rained in London on Saturday, so 2 loads of showers in London that day. Very good. We've got one angry pagan saying good mug from Pagan Ton, I guess. Good people's... the Hafen socialist in chat. I'm probably pronouncing all that wrong. I'm very sorry, one angry pagan. Cathal is there as well, saying morning all. Perry Parlors, happy Mondays to all. Yes, everyone should always have happy Mondays, as in the band. Happy Mondays. Starlight. Oh, sorry about this. Starlight sword of shimmering moonlight, held aloft by a maiden's sacred purpose. That's a Malik Perret. Watery tarts, doling out scimitars. There's no way to run a democratic state, or something like that. I can't remember. Doesn't give executive power. I can't remember the exact quote from Monty Python, but it's something like that. I realised I'm quite big on the screen this morning, and not. I don't want to be that big. I'm too big on the screen. I'm just going to shrink myself down a little bit, so. I'm a little bit more proportionate. Rule of thirds and all that. I don't want the top of my head hitting the... Okay, and Stephanie Wilson said that's why Sunak wanted the coronation on Saturday, to take news of his total failure from the papers. Well, it was a magnificent total and utter failure of the Conservatives in the polls, in the local elections, even better than the polls, in the polling stations on Thursday, in which they lost 1,061 councillors across the country. And then you had these idiots like that Burke from the Daily Mail saying, well, this proves nothing because although the Tories did very badly, Labour didn't win that many seats. And if you project it over the whole nation, then, yeah, right. First of all, this was local elections, and you can't compare local elections to national elections because people vote tactically a lot more. They vote differently to their main party that they vote for in the local elections than they do in the main general elections. Generally speaking, that's why the Lib Dems and the Greens picked up a magnificent number of seats in this particular local election. Also, not all of the constituencies of the United Kingdom were made up, were part of this local election. Mine wasn't. In the city of Durham, where I live, we didn't get to vote. And no one in Scotland, no one in Wales got to vote, no one in Northern Ireland got to vote. So extrapolating the result of this election across over to the general election is just an absolute nonsense. Phil has done an incredible video explaining all of this in much better detail than I could muster this morning. But well worth checking out, because you don't make it. I'm trying to think of a good analogy off the top of my head. But it's a bit like looking at the form of a footballer doing practice and saying that that's going to dictate whether they're actually going to win games and the league. Do you know what I mean? It's a bit different between practice and... But taking penalties, for instance. Oh, well, they get 10 out of 10 in the goal during the penalty practice. Yeah, but under the pressure of an actual match, very different scenario. But we're not going to talk about football, not least because my team Everton looks certain to go down this season, which is heartbreaking after 120 seasons in the top flight. My God. Anyway, loud and clear, sound and vision good. Good morning, says Jeff True. Oh, thank you very much for the trues there. Oh my God, made a reference. Got Stephanie Wilson saying about total failure. We've got Badbone77. Hi, all-time asinine comment. I suppose Liverpool fans having the day off Monday. No answer to funny how people... I suppose Liverpool fans won't be having a day off on Monday. No answer to funny how some people openly against unions and workers, right, still enjoy May the 1st off, though, eh? Yeah, exactly. It is bank holiday today, not because of May the 1st, but because of the coronation, which took place over the weekend, which I've said I'm not going to talk about. But I am going to talk about something connected to it. So there's two things I want to talk about today. The first of all is the Commonwealth. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, the Commonwealth. You know that the Commonwealth of 56 countries around the world, which keeps growing. Rwanda joined a few years ago. Mozambique joined. Gabon has joined. What do all they have in common? They were never British possessions. I don't like using the word colonies because it wasn't a colony; it was a possession. We didn't take over those countries. It was Belgium, Portugal, and France, respectively, and yet they still want to join the Commonwealth. Meanwhile, while countries are clamouring to join the Commonwealth, countries are clamouring to leave the Commonwealth realms. So, bit of a difference here. You can still be in the Commonwealth, but not part of the Commonwealth realm. So, there are 14 countries currently. There used to be 15, but then Barbados became a republic. I think last year, it was pretty recently. And then this year, we've already seen the leaders of Jamaica and Belize state that they don't know if this relationship is going to continue. So what the situation is in these places is they have generally a governor general who's appointed by our monarch, and they run the colony. And they're like the king or the queen. It's a ceremonial role mostly, but there was a constitutional crisis in Australia, I think in the 70s, I think. Someone needs to look that up. Was it Gough Whitlam's government? I can never remember. But basically, the Governor-General of Australia, an unelected position, basically dissolved the Australian government. Anyway, so the Prime Minister of the islands of St. Kitts and Nevis, it's pronounced Nevis as though it's got two E's, even though it's got one, has gone on the record today saying, don't really know if we're going to stay a Commonwealth realm. And you can see why they don't like the idea of swearing allegiance to the king or queen and their descendants. But the bigger issue here, and something that the royals really, really need to address, the royal family, Britain needs to address, our schools need to address, our institutions need to address, everyone needs to address this, is the fact that for 300 years, we stole men, women, and children from their country. We shipped them across the sea, a journey in which up to 50% of their cargo, of the human cargo, of the actual human people on the boat would die in the crossing, and then we would give them a life of not just indentured servitude, because that implies that there's some escape from it, like you can get out of it one day. No, lifelong slavery. We turned humans into chattel, into beasts of burden. That's what we did to our fellow humans. And although the royal family, and Prince Charles in particular, has made some murmurings about the links to slavery, and also if you watch the Meghan and Harry documentary that came out last year, there is a point in that where they talk about the relationship between the British state and the monarchy and slavery in the past. And again, I've said this before, this is one of the reasons why Meghan would have been absolutely brilliant to bring into the royal family in a very warm and compassionate way, because Meghan looked more like people from the Commonwealth. The majority of people in the Commonwealth, don't forget, India and Pakistan are both in the Commonwealth. So, yeah. And so a lot of countries in the Caribbean, and Australian Aboriginals and New Zealand Maori don't necessarily look like me and you, and or King Sausage Fingers. And so they miss an opportunity there. Now, there's been some murmurings about what they are going to do. Now, there's a group in the Caribbean, a trading group, a bit like the EU, called CARICOM. It includes nearly all of the members of the independent nations of the Caribbean, and it also includes Belize and Guyana, which are technically part of Central America and South America, respectively, but they see themselves more as Caribbean countries. They were British colonies. I hate to use that word. And Gina Miller, for instance, was born in Guyana, and at the time, before 1973, we had freedom of movement around the Commonwealth. So she came over with her family as a British citizen, and then that changed when we joined the then EEC in 1973. One of the reasons why we joined the EEC was because we found that our trading partners, being some of the poorest countries in the world, wasn't particularly good for trade. This is something that the older generation, who has this nostalgic thinking about the empire and how it led into the Commonwealth and the relationship between Britain and these other sovereign nations, they don't seem to understand that we left a lot of these places in a state of rack and ruin. we left them with hardly any university graduates. We didn't exactly trash the place on the way out, like what happened in Mozambique and Angola with the Portuguese. But you could argue, and don't forget, one of the most horrific crimes that was ever committed against humanity was partition of India and Pakistan, something that happened because the transition between being a colony of Britain and being an independent state, or two independent states, India, East Pakistan and West Pakistan, it was those lines were drawn by a man who never visited the places that he was drawing a line through. It was a British guy who was brought over. He'd never been to India before. He came over there to draw the line for partition. Said, here we go. And a process that was supposed to take up to 5 years, they completed it in less than 5 months. So yeah, let's talk reparations. Let's talk, what we can do to somehow right the wrongs of the past, or go some way to righting the wrongs of the past. Now, I mentioned CARICOM because they have a 10-point plan for dealing with the slavery question, if you want to call it that. And it includes things like reparations and acknowledgement and, this is the big one, boys and girls, an apology. They really want an apology, a proper official apology from the British state saying we're sorry that we did this in the past. The ramifications of what we did through slavery and then through the era of colonization still echo today. It's why many countries are still poor today, because they didn't get to go ahead. There was a great quote by a protester in the Black Lives Matter protest a couple of years ago, and she explained what it's like to be black in America. And she said, it's a bit like you're asked to play Monopoly, but everyone else has been playing for 100 years, and all of the properties are already bought, and there's hotels on all the properties, and they put you on the go square, and they give you the dice, and they go on, off you pop. And that's what it's like. And then that is a good analogy to transfer to the rest of the world and a lot of the Commonwealth countries that suffered under the British. And I know that we try and maintain this cordial relationship. And I'm not saying that the British haven't done some good in these countries, but especially in West Africa, especially in the Caribbean, I feel like the bad far outweighs the good. And when my stepdaughter comes home from school with history homework, where she has to put positives to the British Empire in, and one of those is that we built railways, and we gave bureaucracy and democracy to India, and then you say to someone, well, yeah, okay, if you want to buy that, but then when did we invade, conquer and colonize Japan? We never did that. They have trains, they have bureaucracy, they have democracy. Funny that. Okay, so we've got Alex Barrett in the chat. It's not for the UK, it's for connections with other countries. Yes, Alec, I was going to come to that actually, with the separation between the British Commonwealth, which only existed for a few years, and the Commonwealth. They dropped the British, pretty smartish, I think. And it's for that Commonwealth between those nations, which is really handy, because it's things like standardization and ease of trade agreements and things like that, the stuff that the EU was founded on. The Commonwealth, comprising 56 nations, but only 16 of them or less have the British monarch as head of state. I think it's 14 now, I might be wrong. One angry pagan says the empire is done, be bourgeois, and Britain as a whole need to come to a reckoning. Yeah, I mean, I feel like, and I've said this before, and I think I upset some people in the comments by saying this, but I want people to feel ashamed of the empire, because the empire overall did a lot of bad. And it might make some people feel good that people on the other side of the world are forced to learn English, and that we took over these places that have been cared for thousands of years. In the case of the Australian Aboriginals, up to 50,000 years people lived on the great continent island of Australia, and then Whitey turned up and destroyed everything. They destroyed their cultures. There was hundreds of different Aboriginal tribes, each with their own languages, each with their own traditions, each with their own way of doing things. And we destroyed that all. Imagine if a group of people from New Zealand, some Maori from New Zealand came to Europe. And instead of having the 44 countries of Europe, and arguably 50 countries of Europe, we had one country called Maoriland, or the Northland of the Maori people. And we all had to speak the same language. And there was no Welsh, there was no French or German or Italian or Spanish. It just all disappeared under the monolithic state of, no, you got to speak our language. Just imagine it happened the other way. Instead of Europe being split into, instead of Europe being put under one big rule, it was Australia. You know, that's what happened to the place. And you imagine it as lots of different nations, nations of you know. I can't think of a better example actually than Europe, because it is so many different linguistic groups all crammed together in a fairly small area. And don't forget, Australia is very big, unless you're looking at the habitable area of Australia, and then it gets very small very quickly. And one of the reasons why we associate Aboriginal people and original Aboriginal culture with the outback and the desert is because that's where nearly all of the Aboriginal people were shunted out to. You can travel around Sydney and Melbourne and Brisbane, and it's very unlikely that you'll see any Aboriginal people. Why? It's not because they don't want to live there. I guess it would be nicer than living in the desert, but they're not allowed to do their own thing. They can't, live by their own laws and their own way of doing things. But also, historically, the Aboriginals were brought in for labour and then shut out from the growing suburbs. They weren't allowed to own houses. They weren't allowed to have property in the same way that white people did. And for a long time, there was a white Australia policy where they didn't want anyone coming to Australia who wasn't white. And for a long time, they ran the stolen generations, where they would actually take children from Aboriginal mothers, rip them from their arms and bring them up with a white family so that they knew how to be white. Yeah, we did that, guys. That was us, an apology. It's kind of the least we could do. And they say, they were Australian by then. They were Australian. It's funny because you go to Australia and the people, the apologists for the treatment of Aboriginals are saying, that wasn't us, it was the British. It was the British that did that. Once we were Australian, we stopped it. What, you became Australian in 1971? Okay. I'm just going to jump into the chat for a moment. We've got Larry the Cat on the line. Hello, Larry the Cat. I'm amazed at Sir Larry the Cat's ability to type with Larry the Cat's paws. When Caribbeans and my parents' generation came to this country, they could speak English, sang God Save the King, and were practicing Christians and called England the mother country. Yeah, it's what we call indoctrination. Badbone777. Yeah, but it feels like such a cop-out. The railways and institutions, etc., were put there for the US to more efficiently exploit their resources. For us. So, yes, at the US there. You put us in capitals. Yes, to exploit their resources. Any benefit natives derived as purely secondary. That's absolutely right. Number 3 saying the gold carriage looked awful. Not as awful as the sedan chair thing that they had in Game of Thrones in that new series of it that looked like it was made of polystyrene. Don't know what was going on there. Murray says Anglo-Saxon expansion and colonisation has been going on for close to 2,000 years. Australia is the nearest the UK have got to having Texas. But Australia, all of the mainland states are now in the hands of the Labour Party, and nationally it's Labour as well. And it looks like the Liberal Party might have a bit of a fight on their hands trying to get back into power anytime soon, although Labour are not doing a particularly amazing job. See the Juice Media for more information on that. Daily Blase, hey Darren. Good morning all. I do hope everyone is well. I wish my team the best of luck today. We need a point to guarantee a place in the League 2 playoffs. Up the mighty Bantams. Okay, well done. Daily Blase. Phonepox Chicken said the native populations of the coastal areas probably disappeared like those who lived where modern New York is now. Yeah, they were pushed into the interior. Now, the treatment of the Maori in New Zealand, in ways, it wasn't much better than the treatment of the Aboriginals, but in a way, it was a lot better because there was a treaty, the Treaty of Waitiki or something. If someone wants to tell me the name of the treaty, the famous treaty of the 1800s, that was signed between the Maori people and the colonisers. Please put that in the chat, so it just reminds me. But at least they acknowledged that the Maori were there for a long time in Australia, there was no acknowledgement that the Aboriginals existed. You know, they saw, the colonisers saw Australia as terra nullius. I mean, you know, blank earth or something. It just means there's nothing there, nothing earth. No, there's no custodians of the land. And there was a guy called, I think, John Batman. His surname definitely was Batman. I don't know if his first name was John. But he's the guy who founded Melbourne. And he paid the Aboriginal tribe that lived there some, you know, trinkets, beads, nothing for the land. A bit like when the Dutch bought Manhattan, I think. And he was very happy with his purchase of the land. And then he was taken to court. He was arrested and taken to court. Does anyone know? Waitangi, the Treaty of Waitangi. Does anyone know why John Batman was taken to court? Anyone have a guess? Was it for buying Melbourne for a few beads? Nope. It was for trading with the Aboriginals because, according to British law, they had no rights to property. So how could you buy something off them? He shouldn't have given them any beads at all. He should have just kicked them in the face and just taken it, because that was the law back then. Yeah. So, from that happy thought, just for a moment, I just want to quickly, before the end of this, I just want to transfer ourselves over to the other side of the Atlantic Ocean, to the terrible things going on in America. Specifically, the insane, absolutely insane number of mass murders that have been going on in, this year, last year, the last 20 years, since AR-15 rifles became legal again. So there was a shooting in Texas where a man, he killed 5 of his neighbours, and he was found, after police found him hiding under a cupboard underneath a pile of laundry. Great. So he shot dead 5 of his neighbours. And then yesterday there was another shooting in another place in Texas, in a Texas mall. So we had 8 people, including children, at a shopping mall. So the youngest victim was 5 in that, and in the other shooting, the youngest victim was 9. Now, trigger warning: can anyone who's sensitive towards violence or child abuse or anything like that, please mute me for a moment, because you don't want to hear this. Actually, it's too early in the morning to talk about stuff this heavy, but it needs to be said. Hunters do not use AR-15s because there's nothing left of the animal that they kill with it. Now, you transpose that horrible fact to a child. And this is why in America right now, there are mothers taking photos of their own children before they go to school so they can remember what clothes they were wearing to school. Because there's a good chance they will not be able to identify the child by their face in the event of a shooting with an AR-15. It's almost always an AR-15. And I've kind of given up hope. 23 years ago, I was busy writing my final year dissertation at university, studying politics and history at Manchester. And it was on American gun law and American gun policy. And it was in the wake of the Columbine massacre of 1999 and looking at all the mass shootings up to that point and what could be done. A couple of years after I finished that dissertation, in which I predicted that nothing would be done and the situation can only get worse because of the hold that the NRA, which is the militant paramilitary wing of the gun manufacturers who just want to make money. They don't care about children dying, adults dying, whatever. They just want to make money. And every time someone goes into a school and murders brutally a lot of children, like what happened in Sandy Hook, on the same day that Sandy Hook happened, a madman in China with a knife went and stabbed a bunch of children in a school in China, and nobody died. It's a lot harder to kill someone with a knife. Guns are so much more effective. And every time that happens, the sheer value of arms companies that manufacture these death machines goes up. And these are multi-billion-dollar industries. And it is in their interest to make people buy guns, to keep them buying guns. So I have a question for anyone. I don't think anyone in America is going to be watching this because it's going to be going out in the middle of the night. But maybe they'll watch on catch up. Why do you think that it is right? And why do you think that people try so hard and spend so much money in ensuring that paedophiles in America can buy guns? That's the question that needs to be asked. You know, like the gotcha question they like to ask Keir Starmer, can a woman have a penis? Yeah, let's do that to American gun nuts. Why do you want paedophiles to have guns? Because the only logical answer to that, the only moral answer to that, the only answer that's defendable is, I don't. Okay. How do we stop paedophiles, convicted paedophiles, from buying guns? We have to have registration and checks, like they have in every other country in the world, apart from America, where you need to get a license and registration to drive a car, to drive a tractor, to fly a plane. Hell, in the UK, you used to need a license to have a bloody dog. I think they should bring that back myself, but, you know, no one has any problem with that. No one's in the equivalent of the DVLA in America screaming about having their car taken from them. It's very important to Americans for paedophiles to be able to buy guns. AR-15s, which are more than capable of killing dozens of people in one hit. Before even a good guy with a gun can possibly turn up. As if that's going to stop the bullets. And as if you're going to get your gun out in an active shooter situation when the police are arriving and they might think that you're the shooter. Never happens. There we go. The law is always right. Aaron says 5 to 61 years old. They're the people who were killed in the massacre over the weekend. Between the ages of 5 and 61. Lives just snuffed out like that. And it is interesting that the Americans love their guns more than humans. More than the sanctity of human life. And also they love property more than the sanctity of human life. If you ever meet anyone from North America and you're not quite sure whether they're Canadian or American, and you want to find out without asking them directly, tell me you're American without telling me you're American, say, do you if someone tries to steal your TV, do you think you should be able to shoot them dead? If they say yes, they're American. If they say no, they're Canadian. Yeah. Bit of a weird one, that. Bolt action rifles at max only. I don't think anyone should have any guns. Just the end of that. You know, this idea that they're going to stand up against the army of the United States. Because they go, oh, well, you know, we stood up against the British military, which is the biggest military ever during the American Revolutionary War. And we stood up against the British because we had arms. And it was like, yes, they had muskets and you had muskets. Now we have the internet, communications, email, satellites, and nuclear weapons. So good luck fighting your own army. Also, the US Army is the biggest employer in America. And 50% or 50 cents out of every one of your tax dollars that you spend in tax in America goes to the military. Yeah, good luck fighting them. Yeah, it's like, oh, it's okay. I've got my AR-15. I've got to defend my house. Drone comes overhead. Bunker buster bomb. See you later, Bob. Anyway, the majority of ordinary Americans actually want more control of guns. It doesn't matter. The money doesn't want it. That's the thing. It's nothing to do with democracy, this. This is what the money wants, and the vast majority of the money wants to make more money. And a great way of doing that is by having guns. And what's amazing and startling and also devastating is the fact that every time there's a massacre, people go out and buy more guns because they feel less safe. They go, shit, I better buy a gun as well. And then the gun manufacturers are laughing their sick, horrible, twisted, murderous little arses off. Now, there is some light at the end of the tunnel. In Michigan last month, actually this is back in March, I think. There was a story about the parents of a Michigan shooter who killed 4 high school classmates back in 2021. Ethan Crumbly, his name is. His parents look like they might have to stand trial for manslaughter because they bought him the gun. Didn't teach him not to shoot people. And I've often thought this. Right back to, again, trigger warning. Back to the brutal murder of Jamie Bulger in Liverpool back in the early 90s. That was a horrific crime that shocked the city and the nation to its core because two very young psychopaths did that. And in the wake of it, weird things happened, like video games were banned. What's it called? Child's Play 3 was banned on VHS. Because we were like, oh, why did these kids do this? Oh, it must have because they watched a scary movie. It must have been because they would play this violent video game. You know, back in the early 90s, video games were like 8-bit, just about nearly 16-bit. So a violent video game would look like Lego bricks showering from the sky. I mean, it was just like, okay, yeah. And yet, their parents were never brought to book, and I always thought that was a bit weird. And I know that you can't really. Can you blame the parents? Yes. Teach your children not to be psychopaths, eh? Or if you think your child might be a psychopath, go and get help. For God's sake, defending your child when you think that they might, do something as horrific as what those boys did. Yeah, it's a bit much. Yeah, involuntary manslaughter. I can see that. And I know there's going to be a lot of parents watching this going, oh, hang on, mate, a bit worried about what their kids might get up to. Bring up your kids right. And if you think your kid has got a problem, do everything in your power to stop them doing something horrible. Because then at least if they do something horrible, you can say, look, I did what I could. We have to talk about Kevin. We did talk about Kevin. We got Kevin some counselling and he still went out and shot a load of his classmates. We did what we could. And then you won't go to jail. If you bought Kevin a bloody gun or an archery set in the movie, well, shouldn't be talking about Kevin, which is a very depressing movie. I wouldn't recommend it. Just no. Sorry, you're culpable. You have responsibility for your own charges. And it's very typical for parents to say, oh, but, it's the teacher's responsibility to teach morality. It's like, no, it's not. It's yours. It really is yours. It really is yours. Graham, I agree with you. That's from Alex. Yes, that's all I need to hear. Anyway, listen, I don't know if James O'Brien is doing a show this morning because it is Halloween, Christmas, Easter. I've forgotten it. May Day. A combination. That's the one. We're all taking a day off to hang out in the rain. It's pouring down here. Repugnant posing for Christmas cards, holding rifles with a 2-year-old. How messed up is that? I mean, yeah. But there's a lot of money behind it. You look at Brexit, you look at anything horrible that has ever happened in the history of the world, there's usually someone making a lot of money out of it, which is insane. Don't forget, after World War II, America emerged as a superpower. Up to that point, it really, really wasn't. Russia emerged as a superpower, bizarrely, after murdering millions of its own citizens. Anyway, 8-bits are dangerous. I know. No KB. Thatcher cut them, introduce care in the community. Well, number 3, there's arguments that would probably make a good video actually talking about care and community years on. But I will say something. One of my friends worked in that whole process of creating care in the community rather than just literally locking people up in hospitals. And when that came in, I think it didn't come in until the early 90s, so it would have been around the same time as what happened to poor little Jamie Bulger. They found that there were women in these institutions who have been there for like 40, 50 years. And the reason they were mad, the reason why they needed to be in an institution, was they'd had a child out of wedlock. Yeah, so something had to be done. Obviously, there was a lot of abuse going on in these homes. And yeah, care in the community, if done right, I think would be a better way of doing it. But of course, Tories being Tories, they never do anything right. They always do everything half cut. They always do something on. They've got all this money, but they'll rather budget it on other things. And I'm going to leave you, before I go, because I've really got to wrap it up for today. I'll leave you with the fact that some of the food banks in the UK were asking the National Lottery for funding for food banks to feed hungry citizens of this country, to feed hungry children in this country. And the National Lottery was getting back to them saying, sorry, that money's been allocated for other events, such as the coronation. So, yeah. Great. Anyway, so yeah, I'll thank you for all of your wonderful messages. I don't think the chat relay is working, so if you want to read the messages, you have to read them on the ones that came up on the screen, and that's not necessarily all of them because it's just the top chat that comes up. So sorry if your message didn't come up. If you do want your messages to definitely be read, if you drop in a super chat, then it'll definitely be read. But I can't be asking for super chats every bloody day. Phil Morehouse will be back tomorrow morning at 9:30 in the morning for another morning brew, and he'll have a lot to talk about, I'm sure, as he always does. And I'll be back on Wednesday for morning brew, and then after Prime Minister's questions. So I hope to see you then. We'll be putting up a few more shows in the meantime, I hope. Yeah, I would like a day off one day, but it's never going to really happen, I don't think. So just in time to say thank you very, very, very much for watching. Thanks to all my patrons and YouTube members out there. If you want to go over to the Discord server for a little bit, I'll be over there soon. If you want to become a member of our Discord community, you have to sign up as a patron or as a YouTube member, and I will give you access to that Discord server where we can discuss things like that. And we're going to grow it as well into a forum where we can play video games and watch movies and all that kind of stuff like it used to be. The rebuilding commences. The coronation was in at least 32 bits. That's how dangerous it is, says Don Donovan. And on that bombshell, thanks for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow. Until then, hello, good evening, welcome, and goodbye.